Started here. Good evening. Welcome to our virtual author event tonight with Sam Harris. My name is Pat Kowitzel. I'm the buyer and author program coordinator at Magic City Books, and we are thrilled to be welcoming Oklahoma native, Sand Springs native, Sam Harris for a talk tonight about his new novel, The Substance of All Things. And before we get to the program, we have a few things that I just wanted to mention to you. We've been doing these virtual author events since mid-April, and gosh, it feels like it's been even longer than that. We've mostly been doing them on Monday and Thursday evenings, but we've been adding in events like we are tonight with, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from time to time. And we are really excited about being able to continue to present author programs. Obviously, we love doing these in person, and we wish that Sam were able to join us in Tulsa, and hopefully down the road when that's safe for all of us to gather together again, and Sam's spending a little bit of time back here in Oklahoma, we'll be able to bring him to the audience and for an in-person event. But for tonight, being able to do this virtually from our own home while we're having dinner or, doing something else in the background, then that's great. And we're happy to be able to do these events that way as well. We are going to be doing another few events throughout the month of July that are of interest, including next Monday night. We have an event with the poet Francine Ringgold and the photographer Sam Joyner, who have collaborated on a wonderful, wonderful book where Sam's photography has inspired poetry from Fran. And so that's next Monday night at 7 o'clock. And if you are interested in kind of those local author events and stories with that kind of local interest, where like tonight's novel set in Oklahoma, that one might be of interest to you. We also have a local novelist, Richard Cox. His new book is coming out. And so that book releases July 27th. We're doing an event with him that evening. And a true crime story, July 28th, with the author Jax Miller. Her book, Hell in the Heartland, is about a true crime case, a cold case here in Oklahoma that happened a little over 20 years ago, and so that's another one. So all that information is on the Magic City Books website. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter, get that so that you can always make sure you know about those events as they're coming up. Tonight we are thrilled to be joined by a special guest moderator, Ken Busby, and Ken is the executive director and CEO of the Route 66 Alliance, and previously he served as the executive director and CEO of the Arts and Humanities Council of Tulsa. He has held numerous other positions throughout the city through arts organizations and other nonprofit organizations. And he is the true cultural czar of our city and area. And for that, we couldn't be more thrilled to be welcoming Ken Busby to be our special guest moderator tonight in conversation with Sam Harris. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ken now. Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you, Pat, and it's really an honor to be here. I was absolutely thrilled when Sam contacted me and asked if I would be able to do this. Our mutual friend Teresa Miller recommended me because she was unavailable, and I don't know how well you all know Sam. I think you know him pretty well. Sam doesn't have a lot of patience, and so his book is coming out. And it came out July 1. And so Teresa was like, well, I really can't do this for you until August. And he's like, well, I can't wait till August. So there you go. So I'm here and thrilled to have this opportunity. Sam, it's great to see you.
Hi, Ken. The cultural czar. You're very famous, Ken.
Oh yes, of course, of course.
You are, and thank you so much for doing this. Teresa sings your praises, and of course, and when I told my mom that you were going to be moderating this, she was like, oh my God, I love him. So I'm very, very happy to be here.
She's sweet. Well, thank you very much. So I'm thrilled to be doing this, and of course, thrilled that Magic City Books is hosting this. Remember to go to their website to purchase Sam's new book, The Substance of All Things, which is what we're going to talk about. But Sam, I always think everybody knows you because you're a household name, certainly a Sand Springs native and so forth. But I thought I'd give just a little bit of bio about you for folks, just to set you up, to tell you how great you are, in case you and besides, your mother wrote this, so I'm just going to read it now. Okay. The man, the myth, the legend that is Sam Harris.
Wow.
A multifaceted career. He has run the gamut from singer to songwriter, writer to actor on Broadway, film, television, writer, director, producer, author. He's a man of innumerable talents. His legendary appearances, of course, on Star Search gave him his first national platform because he was pulling in audiences of more than 25 million people a week. That's incredible. It's just amazing. Anyway, Rolling Stone magazine, of course, has named him one of the top 100 singers of all time. Multi-platinum recording artist, 9 studio albums to his credit. He's toured extensively in concert. He's received numerous awards on Broadway. Let's see, wait a minute. What'd she say here? He has appeared.
Mother?
Yes, your mother. He's appeared on numerous television series and starred in several films and documentaries. He's written for television, produced and directed several shows. I had the pleasure of meeting you for the first time in 2015. I mean, I'd seen you, I'd known who you were, I'd seen you perform, but to actually meet you and spend time with you at the Tate Awards, the Tulsa Awards for Theater Excellence, when you received the Distinguished Artist Award. And of course, that was a thrilling night, and Teresa was there, and great fun. And then his memoir, Ham, Slices of Life, published by Simon & Schuster, received rave reviews across the critical spectrum. It evolved into the musical play Ham, a musical memoir, which received resounding success in New York and Los Angeles. Won numerous awards there, was filmed for television. And you're currently working on, well, he's currently working on, we'll talk in the first person in a second. He is currently working on and starring and writing an upcoming television series, The Astounding Fall and Rise of Lydia Feldman.
Yes.
Okay, I want to hear about that in just a second. And then finally, his new novel, we're going to talk about tonight, The Substance of All Things. Sam is married to businessman Danny Jacobson. They're the proud father, and I love your son's name, Cooper Atticus Harris Jacobson.
Steve, where did that name come from?
I have no idea. Perhaps you could enlighten us on that as well. So everyone out there in TV land, please welcome Sam Harris. Good to see you, man.
Hello, everybody. Boy, I sound like I've been so busy.
You have, man. I mean, you should be much older than you are.
Oh, are you? Please, God, no. Please, God, no. No, I have been busy. I keep busy, and then my son is 12 years old now, and not going to school for the last 3 months, and so we're dealing with that. But just on a personal note, we're getting out of Los Angeles, and we're going to go to Montana for 2 weeks and live on a ranch where there's no COVID and there's no people, and we're going to go horseback riding and fly fishing and water rafting and get the hell out of Dodge.
That sounds awesome, actually. Wow.
Great.
Wow. So, so for which of you or your son, has this been more of a challenge, the COVID impact?
He doesn't show it. He doesn't, he's on his stupid video games, which we've really had to bend the rules on. So he has that social interaction through his headset. I think it's affected him subconsciously more than he shows. For me, it's really rough. I miss seeing my friends. I miss going out to dinner once in a while. But to tell you the truth, Ken, I am such an isolating kind of person that I have adjusted fairly well. We can go outside. So I go on walks in the morning and hikes, and I take the dogs out and I take Cooper out. But I know there are different kinds of personalities that just can't take it, to which I say, suck it up. This is a temporary time. It's a temporary time. We're going to get through this. Wear your mask. Don't kill anybody. Don't kill your family. We're going to get through this. So I'm adjusting as well as possible. Plus, I have these projects going, which keeps me busy at home.
Well, exactly. And I was thinking I started to start tonight in a mask because I'm really one of those committed to that, though. When I'm out in public, I'm in a mask. I mean, I
was very proud of Tulsa, of Oklahoma, for using prudent wisdom when the rally came there, and they were expecting all these people, and I would thought, oh my, that's so smart. People really are protecting themselves and each other, and there's a time and a place for that, and this isn't it. So I was really glad to hear that people were taking care of themselves.
Right. We're having a few issues right now. We're seeing a little uptick, but hopefully we'll get it.
We are too in LA.
Hopefully we'll get it back together. Yeah.
Yes, we will. We will.
So before we get into the book, do you want to talk a little bit about your new television series?
Well, it's called the Astounding Fall and Rise of Lydia Feldman, and it's about this sort of hard-edged, politically incorrect agent who was a huge powerhouse in the 80s and 90s, and then she was hit by a tourist tram at Universal Studios, and she was in a coma for 21 years. And she awoke to a new world in which everything is very PC. And so her sort of, large personality doesn't really function in that way. However, we sold it to E1 Entertainment and Mark Gordon, who's a marvelous producer, Grey's Anatomy and Ray Donovan and all these things. But now with COVID happening, we've actually retooled it a little bit where she is Zooming with clients and different famous people, her clients, and her sort of out in the world as much as possible. But we're all trying to adapt. I mean, the series was ready to go from the pilot script, and then all this happened, and it's just, kicked us in the butt.
Well, but you've also incorporated it, so you're making it very relevant.
You got to roll, man. If there's anything I've learned in my career, you just reinvent and you go as you go, and you just keep going.
Right. What else are you going to do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's get to that's. I can't wait to see that. So I can't wait till that's out. Do we have a timeline yet when we might see it?
Well, we did, but now we don't.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens. But
stay tuned, folks. Stay tuned. Right. So let's get now to the purpose of tonight, the substance of all things. Let me start off by saying, I am so glad that I got to read this book, and it is truly riveting. Once I started it, I did not stop. I read it continually until I was done, because
not just because you had to.
No, I had it in plenty of time. But it was that well crafted. The characters were that intriguing that I didn't want to not know what was going to happen. And I've got to tell you, as the book ends, and of course we have to be careful, we don't want to give it all away because you're going to want to get your copy. And I know Pat has put in the chat here how to order your copy. I don't want to give it away, but I was immediately thinking, I hope that he's going to write a sequel. Because
really,
I think the characters are rich enough that I wanted to know more. I wanted to know where their lives were going to go from here. I wanted to know more about. And I think that's a great telling sign when I wanted to know more.
Thank you. Well, there is, there's because this is brand new, so very few people have read it. Although I have to say, this morning I woke up and I went on Amazon.com to look at the reviews and the customer reviews because the book just came out, so people are just starting to receive it. And I'm like, oh my God, people are embracing this, my baby, because as a writer, you live in such a vacuum.
Sure.
And on Goodreads, people are responding, so that makes me happy. But for people who don't know the book yet, there are two. It's the first part is set in 1968 in rural Oklahoma in a fictional town called Dalton, which is fairly based on Sand Springs, where I grew up. And then
I saw some similarities.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there is the current times with this same character, Theo. And we sort of know what happened to him in the middle, but not really. So Ken, maybe there is a sequel of what happened in the middle.
Oh, good. I hope so.
I have no idea what that would be, but we'll see.
You've created this, as you said, this is your first novel. I mean, this is your first.
Ham was a memoir. Ham was a collection of personal essays and mostly fun, with some, poignant and transparent things. But this is fiction. It's a whole other animal. There are many words, Ken. There are so many
words. I know, a lot of words. Yes, almost 400 pages worth of words and no pictures. But I want to give you credit again on this score, because your descriptions were so apt and so clear. I really could see your characters. I really could see what they looked like. And I think that's another great testament to your abilities as a writer, because I know you love to write. But the characters ring true, and you feel like you know these people, or you want to know these people, and it's like people that you may have encountered in your life, and so it's like you did an excellent job. What made you want to write a novel?
Well, it wasn't my idea. After Ham, a bit after Ham was published by Simon and Schuster, went to New York. They asked me to come to New York for a meeting and to discuss some things. And I met with the president of Gallery Books and my editor, and they sat me down at this lunch, and I thought we were going to talk about, and the next Ham, and all these personal anecdotes, all these stuff. And they said, we think you should be writing fiction. I was completely taken aback.
Wow.
And they said, and I say this with humility, they said, we believe that you have the chops. And there were so many reviewers that had said he needs to be writing fiction. But it really threw me because a novel is a very daunting prospect, and intimidating. And I wouldn't say that it's not been in the back of my mind, but I know what that entails. Having written for television and film and plays and things, which are short-term, much less involved projects, I knew what this would mean. And so I sat on it, and a couple of ideas came and went, but they didn't sit right. And I actually had a year of a writer's block on this.
Where did that come in the 4-year process? The 1 year.
Where did the writer's block come? It didn't come during it. It came before it.
So
I didn't know what I was going to write. I had no idea.
Okay.
Yeah, and so what happened is we were at dinner at a friend's house, and Doug and Paula, and Doug was like, Sam, what's up with you? I've never known you to not be able to just kind of flow, just creatively just kind of flow, whatever you do. And I said, I don't know what to do. And maybe I was intimidated by the whole prospect. And so he started asking me questions about my childhood. He started sort of interviewing me as a friend. And then I remembered this story that I had written but was never published. And all of a sudden, it just kind of came. And I actually left the dinner party and I said, do you have a legal pad? And I went and sat in the corner of a bedroom while the rest of the people were eating and started making notes. And as soon as that happened, the initial concept happened.
Okay. Wow. Well, I think it'd be great if you don't mind. I'd like for you to share a little bit with our audience.
Sure. Okay.
Whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Well, I'll tell you, it's tricky. It's tricky, Ken, because I don't want to give anything away.
I know.
So I think, knowing that we're going to do a couple of these, how about I just read the prologue?
That'd be great.
Okay. So this was to be the very first thing that you read, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay. Here we go.
First of all, here's the cover. It's hard to see in this light, but there's a boy on the front in a field. Everything that came forever after was determined by my father's split-second decision to swerve. Only a moment before it happened, there had been a kind of affectionate silliness and anxious laughter, his half hiccuping and hers tinkling and soft and nervous. Then the flash of the animal in fleeting light, solid and fixed, blurred by the downpour of the futile zigzag of windshield wipers, the eternity of the moment. Knowing nothing can be done. There should be a way to stop time when these things happen. Pull a lever, flip a switch. The crash was relentless, the skidding, flipping, cartwheeling, the crushing of glass and metal mixed with the brittle snapping of my bones. I was flying through the air, my body flimsy and unmuscled, slammed and jolted, the foolish attempt to grab onto anything, the ripping away of every feeling of safety I'd ever known. Then absolute stillness. I assumed I was dead. Then I felt my heart strike against my chest. The only reason I'm alive right now is because death hasn't found me yet. It was quiet before the static chatter of the rain. Shouldn't someone be moaning or calling out? Shouldn't I be calling out? My eyelids fluttered to see steam rise, a fist of gray smoke in the red hue stretching out over the grassland. A constellation of shattered glass glistened across the dashboard in the moonlight. Then a sudden spewing, a hissing of air, something trying to escape. I have to escape. I tried to pull myself up, but my hands were numb, limp. Just as I began to sense the sweat that covered me, I felt a pull at my foot, then a hand, a cold hand, wrapping around my ankle, fingernails cutting into me. I heard short gusts of breath, and I felt her swollen body beneath me, her swollen belly beneath me. How can she be under me? Theo, are you okay? I don't know. Can you get out? I don't know. George, nothing. Help me, Theo. I don't know how. Try, you can do it, honey. You're my big boy. Try. A low aching pulse spread through my useless wrists, and I climbed up with my elbows and twisted my body sideways and over her so that I could crawl through the broken window snagged by the frame of jagged glass. I fell to the muddy ground with a thud and lay there a minute, 10 minutes, 20. The metallic taste of blood thickened in my mouth like a rancid paste. At some point, I have to move. Can you walk? I think so. Run, Theo, she said. Run and get help. The baby's coming. That's the first part of the prologue.
Now, if that doesn't get you, if that doesn't get the audience brought into it, I don't know what will.
It's this crisis that happened to him in a November night of 1961, but the book takes place 6 years later in 1968, which became a summer and circumstances that greatly outweighed even the tragedy of this. I will tell you this, and it's not a spoiler alert. Theo loses his mother in that automobile accident, and his hands are permanently disfigured. And when he's 12 years old, he learns through a very unlikely mentor, a Native American who lives in a trailer on the outskirts of town, who's basically an outcast. And he learns through this person, who, by the way, is this sort of mythological, scary person. People throw rocks at his trailer, the kids, he's this scary myth. And Theo, under strange circumstances, meets him, and this man introduces him or recognizes that Theo has the capacity to heal through his disfigured hands. And so the summer that ensues is about grasping this gift and dealing with the largeness of it. It has to do with faith. It has to do with the concept of God. It has to do with the burden of a gift for a 12-year-old child, and ultimately that gift is exploited. And then meanwhile, that's placed against adult Theo, which is the second part of the prologue, who is the therapist and who's come to an impasse in his life. And it is through his work with a very, what would you call her, Ken? She's damaged. She's very damaged. A damaged, broken woman, that he is able to look back at this summer when he was 12 years old and come and relive it and deal with it because it has so greatly affected his life. So the book goes back and forth between young Theo and older Theo.
Which is great. And I was going to ask you how you came up with that.
Oops, you just know.
Because it really is an intriguing, because as you realize, as you're seeing older Theo, I'm sorry, what?
You're there. You froze for a second, but you're there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do that sometimes. I'm looking at some of one of the comments in the chat. It says from Kathy Pearsall, says, I'm on page 65, but after hearing you read the prologue, I know that for the rest of the book, I will be hearing it through your voice.
Oh, thank you, Kathy.
What a nice thought. You do have obviously you have an excellent voice, an excellent career, but listening you tell it, it is your baby, and you just hear it come out. So so have you thought about an audiobook?
Well, I know that we'll do that eventually. Don't wait for it, people.
Okay, right. Don't because you don't want to wait now. You have to know what happens.
There's many characters in this, and as you know, Ken, and it's set in Oklahoma in the 60s, or the primary story. And there are characters like there's his aunt Eli, who is full of these tried and true colloquialisms that are
Witticism,
just,
yes.
you know, it's hotter than a billy goat and what's a billy goat's bottom in a pepper patch. And so so there's all these things, and the color, you know, it's interesting, you know, to have grown up there.
Right.
This town is a character in itself.
Absolutely.
And having grown up there, I know what it feels like and smells like, and the shape of the clouds, and what the fields are like, and the culture and the religious culture. And it is it's a character, wouldn't you say, Ken?
Absolutely. Yeah, the town becomes a character too. Absolutely. Absolutely it does. So back to the idea of the convention though, how did you decide, because really when we're done, when we get to the end of the book and you've done this old Theo, young Theo, and we're an older adult and we're back to 12, he, of course, yeah, again, not giving anything away, but he has helped this woman who's a broken woman, who's a damaged woman, and he's helped himself at the same time. And that is the beauty of how this book ends. But my question to you is, how did you decide on that convention as you're sitting there with your legal pad in the bedroom of this home? But how did you come up with this idea as a way to move this novel along?
I'll tell you what happened. And if I'm anything at this age in my career, it's that I listen to good advice, that I pay attention, and I absorb something that was beyond my original scope. I wrote only the young Theo story to begin with. That was the book.
Okay.
And I had an editor who said to me, what happens to Theo? What happens to Theo? Because at the end of the young Theo story, I don't want to give anything away, but he's an understanding about what he can and cannot do with this gift. And he said, what happens? And I thought about what would be if this person did have this gift that they were troubled with, who had created this kind of drama and struggle with, what would they be doing now? And so that B story, or equal story, came completely after the first one was written. And to investigate Theo as an adult who, as I said, he's at this sort of insurmountable impasse in his life. And forcing him to go back to look at this and relive this, what it did was it also informed the first book and the elements of Theo's life as a child that he has to deal with. The woman came quite sort of organically. I'm not giving too much away, but she has been abused as a child. Right. And that is her brokenness. And it's not just, oh, she's a victim of abuse. It is a troubled and complex issue for her because it's not cut and dried. And it's actually, you know, I love this woman so much. She's salty and she's smart alecky and she's spirited and she does not pity herself. She does not pity herself to a dangerous degree that she just wants to fix it and go on. But as in therapy, he digs, she digs, and they come to her truth, which is very painful. But it allows him to also have the bravery to go back. There's a thing in the prologue where he talks about, I can assess the facts, I can look at them, spot them, and move on. Well, we all know that that's just citing the facts of our troubled past, whatever tragic or damage there was for us. That doesn't mean we've explored feeling those things. So she forces him to go back in his own process.
So in your first book, Ham, you went with a great publisher, Simon & Schuster. You chose to self-publish this time.
I did.
And I'm curious as to why and if there was anything about the timing of when this book is being released and what was going through your head with all of that.
Bingo, Ken. Bingo.
Yes.
I finished the book. I have a wonderful literary agent. And I know that, well, first of all, the publishing industry has changed so much. And, you know, over 50% of books that are on Amazon and, you know, all these places are independent writers, are indie books.
Right.
And the publishing industry has changed a great deal. And also, it takes such a great deal of time. between finding the right publisher, hoping they like you, then you go through another year of editing, and then it comes out at a certain time of year and blah. We're talking about a year or two away if all the things come together.
Right.
I look at what's happening right now, and I know for myself, I'm reading more than I have in quite some time because we're isolated.
Right.
And I also, there is a healing aspect to this theme, and there are actual themes of isolation. The woman in therapy cannot be touched. It actually hurts her to be physically touched. That's her phobia. And in this time of isolation, which we literally cannot touch other people that we love or that we used to be with, there are issues of isolation. I'm not saying the book is about that at all. It's not about COVID, not remotely, but it deals with issues. And frankly, also this book, it's about broken people and it's about healing. And I know for me, the books that I'm attracted to right now are about broken people who need healing. What it is. So we decided we're not going to go through this process. Let's go, boom, 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 get it out. Because of my last book and because of my agent, we were able to get like this special white glove Amazon KDP things where they really created a wonderful circumstance for an indie book. And so we went with it.
That's
and
awesome.
It's out now instead of a year and a half from now.
Right. Which, folks, if that doesn't remind you, you need to go to Magic City Books. It's in the chat.
Absolutely.
And get your copy while we're speaking. Well, actually, listen to Sam and then get it. But, you know, make a note. The other thing that I was thinking about with your timing, and again, this is not central to your novel, but your book also deals with some issues of race and prejudice in a very subtle way. And I also was thinking about, given this point in our country, as we're dealing with the death of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and all of that, how do you see your novel adding to that conversation?
Well, first of all, Frank, who's one of the main characters, who's the Native American that I spoke with, he is ostracized. He is an outsider. It's because of other things. He is rumored to have killed a soldier in a war. But he's called some pretty foul things by the town bullies. And there's also, it's interesting that, you know, this is again 1968. And the people with whom Theo first comes in contact with this gift being pushed by Frank are Black people in colored town.
Right.
Very different culture, a very different thing than his white world, even though Theo is poor.
Right.
And this community embraces him and takes him in and doesn't question him. Meanwhile, the white people are afraid and call his gift the devil's work.
Right.
So there's a point, I think, when Theo's in church during this really sad scene where he's really being ostracized, and he says, "I wish Mr. Lewis and Miss Vida were there, but they wouldn't have been allowed." So there is a race division.
Oh yeah, I think you touched in a really important way. I think it's a nice element of the overall story to that adds to the current conversation. I was pleased with the characters you presented and how you let that unfold. I thought you did a really nice job with that.
Thank
and
you.
really touched me as I read it. Obviously, you know, this book set in a town very similar to Sand Springs. How much of this book and this novel is autobiographical?
Well, not to sound cliche, but you know, they say you write what you know. And I think that I'm in all these characters to a degree. For Theo, young Theo, I think that he is me and I am him, and that I felt very much like an outsider. His is because he has this disfigured, he's crippled. And so he is the target of bullies and such, and just is outside. Also, little thing, his name is Theo Dalton. The town is Dalton, Oklahoma. His ancestor, his great-great-grandfather founded the town, except none of the money went to the family. It went to other places that are kind of a secret in the book, you'll find out, and also the town itself. There's a line in there that says that the Jebediah felt that his legacy would be better felt in brick and mortar than in flesh and blood. So anyway, what was I saying? What were we talking about? Oh, autobiographical. So yes, he is me, and then I felt a bit of an outsider. And I found music and writing and acting and pretending a healing agent for myself, but also I latched on at a very early age to songs and stories that were about hope and healing and looking for a better way. And so even though my circumstances aren't the same as Theo's, I relate to him and I understand him. And but there are elements in all these characters that I identify with. And something else, Ken, I'd like to bring up that's really important to me. And this is what I think as an actor, you know, when you play a role and you inhabit that person and you find personal aspects of your life that you can imbue the character with so that they become real for you, that also informs my writing in the way that they stand, they smoke, they lean, they talk, their speech pattern, and, you know, all of that. But what it also does is that no one is one thing. There is no good and bad. There is no villain and, you know, hero. Everyone has all of these elements, and even a villain thinks that they're a good person. They have a mission and an agenda, and they think that they are right in what they are doing, and sometimes righteous in what they are doing, but they're human beings. And so rather than paint things in broad strokes and black and white, what I tried to do was find the humanity in all of these people, whether they be on the exterior good and bad. They're human. And as an actor, if I'm playing a villain, I can't play him like, oh, I'm in the, you know, I have to play him like someone who wants something, who thinks of themselves as doing the right thing. Right. So that informs my writing with those people too.
Okay, I'll buy that. I'll buy that. Yeah. So I want to pull some quotes from your book. Again, not giving anything away, but okay. you pepper this book with some very interesting. Oh, you're sorry. You pepper and your characters pepper this book with some interesting comments, and I just like a little feedback from you on a couple of the quotes. So, for example, I should tell you, I don't want to set it up. I just want to give you the quote. Okay. Because normal isn't determined by what somebody else thinks or even what most people think. Normal is personal. Your hands are normal to you. Normal is what you know. It's whatever you're used to.
That's right. I mean, in Theo's case, his hands are disfigured, granted from this accident, so he had normal hands before that. But it's what he's used to. That is his normal. If someone has some sort of affliction, or if someone, you know, you can have empathy or even pity for someone in a different situation. But if that's their normal, nothing is normal. I mean, everything is normal and nothing is normal. Everything is normal. You hear all the time, don't you, about somebody who grew up impoverished in, you know, poor situations, and they had the greatest childhood because they didn't know any different. That was their normal. Whatever your normal is what you are.
Perfect. There you go. All right.
Can I also add to that in this situation, and you're talking about, that's a quote from the woman.
Yes.
That her normal was not good. It was very broken and very painful, but that was her normal, so that's what she was used to.
Exactly, yes. So, do you also believe, but you know, Doc, people believe anything if you do it with conviction.
That also comes from her.
Yes, it does. You gave her a lot of good thoughts, man.
Good. You know, it's funny. I think of Frank as the wise one, but yes, it's true. Um, you know, my son will look at me and tell me something with his big doe eyes that is good. And I'm like, you are lying to me. But, but he's very convincing. I think that is true. And I think that that's what gets us in trouble too, is that when people do something uh, either personally or on a large scale, if you say it with conviction, all of a sudden, must be true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You reference in there from around the time of the assassination of Robert Kennedy. And speaking here, it says, this fella that's got two names, this Sirhan fella, and Frank is talking.
Yeah.
One person can change the world for good or for bad. You know, it's possible to assassinate the future or heal it. Works both ways.
Right.
How? Yes.
You know, it's the concept of the butterfly effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that what we do in the world every day, what we put out in the world every day, can either create goodness or discourse and drama. As simple as if I yell at somebody from my car because they cut me off,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to just like, oh, that person might have been in a hurry, it has an effect. And
Absolutely.
this is speaking to Theo,
Mm-hmm.
young Theo, when he is trying to deal with the responsibility of this gift. Because all of a sudden, if you have this gift, can you be everywhere?
Right.
If he was there at the Ambassador Hotel, could he have saved Bobby Kennedy?
Right.
You know, what is that on the shoulders of a young boy who was thinking, what do I do with this? Am I enough? What if, does it work? Does it not work? How do you manage that the burden of that kind of gift? And that's a lot for a kid to deal, well, anyone, but that's a lot for a kid to deal with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I was thinking on that line, the weight that it puts on that person toward the end, just before we go into session 9. No, son, things that happen don't make us who we are unless we let them. He leaned into me with and his face grew soft, or they can show us who we can be.
Right.
That was a really powerful, I thought, reflection. Following up on what you were just talking about, is like we can either let them, we react to things, and how we react sets up the very the next minute, the next hour, the next day, the next week,
next life. Because that's Frank talking, and he's saying that circumstances can either define us or inform us. And when there is a tragedy in someone's life, and they live the rest of their life of that changed me, that crippled me, and I mean not literally.
No, metaphorically.
That's why I can't do this. That's why I can't do that. That's why. Then we've allowed that circumstance to define us. Whereas the same thing can happen to someone else who lets that circumstance inform them. And perhaps that tragedy or whatever it is gave them a greater empathy for someone else, allowed them to help someone else, allowed them to be a better person than a person who then becomes small and uses that tragedy as a justification for not living fully. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely, spot on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you also believe that no matter what happens, it's going to be all right if you want it to be?
I do believe that.
Good. I thought you did, but I wanted to hear you say it.
I do believe that. I don't think that means it's all rosy. I mean, I think some horrible things happen. But again, it's what you do with it. I had a friend whose outgoing message used to be, have a nice day, unless you have other plans.
I love that. I love that. You have to incorporate that. That's cool. Well, we're getting on in the book here, but Auntie Lai is speaking, and they're talking, of course, to Theo, young Theo. And she says, "You just haven't woken up yet, Dumplin'," said Auntie Lai, patting my head as if I was a Cocker Spaniel. "Theo, honey, why don't you eat some breakfast? Eatin' always makes me happy." And when I read that phrase, I remembered something that my grandmother always said in our family, and it's a tradition we've carried on, which was that we would always feel better. We'll feel better after we eat. No matter what was going on, we'll feel better after we eat. And when I read your statement about eating always makes me happy.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
Personally, absolutely. But she also says later in the book, she says, because he's just exhausted. He's exhausted. Right. Theo is spent and exhausted, and everything has worn on him. And she says, "Hey, honey, we'll just go back at the hotel and we'll order in something." What did she say? We'll order in something fun like ribs. So, you know, she's a character who, when she's at their house, she's plucking. It talks about her removing her church gloves and plucking a piece of bacon off of Theo's father's plate. And she goes, "You know, I'm sorry. I'm so hungry. I could eat the leg. I could eat the leg off the Lamb of God."
That's right. So, I laughed out loud.
Yeah, foods have been an important factor in my personal life. You know, my 2 o'clock binging on peanut butter, but that's not what this is about.
Story, and we'll say that for our next therapy session, because time's almost up. So, you know.
Is it really?
We're getting close to that. I want you to read again, but before.
Yes.
So, but I didn't know what you might want to read.
Okay. Okay. I know what I'm going to read. Okay. I'm going to read. So Theo has been introduced to this concept of healing by Frank. Mm-hmm. And the way that it happened was that he had been chased basically into Frank's property by these bullies who were after him. Right. And Frank had introduced him this thing because he saw something happen with Theo. And then there's this baby bird that Frank tells him, "Put it in your hands and imagine you are the bird. Imagine you were the bird." And the bird flies. It was a bird with a broken wing. So he says, "If you want to know more, I'm here, come back." So I'm going to read you about the first time that Theo actually encounters, or this gift is put to a human being.
Awesome.
He sneaks out in the middle of the night to go to Frank. Mm-hmm. It was a starless night, but the moon carved a bow shape through the blackness. Careful as a thief, I made my way down Jackson Street and hopscotched the shortcut through Mr. Lafler's vegetable garden and sprinted to the field out back. Once on Saw Creek Road, I slowed my pace and took in the lonely open plain and the smell of long ago cows. When I reached the top of the driveway, Frank stepped out of his trailer, putting on his jean jacket. "You ready?" he said, as if expecting me. I nodded, unsure of what I was supposed to be ready for. I walked briskly, trying to match Frank's broad stride. "Where are we going?" "See if we can help somebody." It must have been a mile. The cicadas came alive in a staccato chant, jubilant or cautionary, I couldn't know which. When we reached a small hill, Frank lifted a rusty strand of barbed wire and I crawled under. Then he used a post to brace himself and hopped over. We trod through a cluster of blackberry bramble, careful to avoid the prickly thorns, and came out the other side. Before us was a small settlement of run-down clapboard houses with wood-shingled roofs set on chalky red clay earth. Colored town. It was a dismal place. There were no streetlights, only the flicker of televisions from inside houses. A man, black as slate, wearing overalls hanging by one strap and mud-caked infantry boots, sat on a tree stump and spit a stream of tobacco juice a good 3 feet when Frank and I walked by. I knew white people didn't come here. I was scared. I didn't know Frank that well, or really at all for that matter. My father didn't know where I was. I could be kidnapped or worse, and no one would know. Sad, 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 but that's what happens when boys disobey, I could hear my Auntie Li saying at my funeral. Frank and I climbed the creaking steps of a wooden porch, gray and splintered and patched with planks of newer wood. One of the posts holding up the porch roof had been replaced with the narrow trunk of a tree. A clothesline was nailed to it and draped to the next porch in the space between houses. A bicycle with one wheel leaned against the wall, and I wondered if it was meant for repair or just that no one had bothered to get rid of it. Frank knocked on the door, and the man who'd been plowing the field next to Frank's answered, "A Mr. Lewis. Evening. This is the boy I was telling you about. Name's Theo." Mr. Lewis said, "Well, howdy, young man. You come on in." "Pleased to meet you, sir." I entered the house. My breath was high and shallow, and my heart fluttered inside my chest like a moth caught in a spider's web. What am I doing here? Mr. Lewis led us through the front room, tidy and furnished with mismatched wooden chairs of varying size. Embroidered pillows sagged against a high-back scrolled sofa with the carving chipped and gouged. A weathered guitar lay on its side, its shape like a woman in repose. There were two pictures on a recently painted white wall hung loosely on a wire so that the tops leaned out. On wobbly legs, I shuffled toward the dim light that bled from beneath a doorway. We entered the small bedroom with barely enough space for the double bed and two cots that were separated by hanging sheets drawn back and tied with red ribbon. Two boys, one about Lily's age and one a little younger, sat on the cots and stared at the back of a slight, kerchiefed woman I guessed to be their mama. "Vida, this is the boy, Theo," said Mr. Lewis. She turned to me, her hazel eyes distressed and her eyebrows crooked with worry. A baby lay in her arms, breathing short and ragged. The child's skin was the same cinnamon blush as its mother's. "Thank you for coming, Theo," she said, her bottom lip trembling until she bit it hard. "We done tried everything. Went to emergency at St. Francis and they made us wait 5 hours just to get seen. Cece got better, but then she got worse. Medicines ain't working." She shifted side to side, rocking the baby. "Curtis fetched a doctor from town, Dr. Wallace. Never been to our parts before." She shook her head side to side like a metronome. "Was here all of 15 minutes like he was going to catch a virus and turn colored. He gave us more medicine and Cece got better, but then she got sick again, sicker this time. I know Dr. Wallace ain't coming back." The woman started to cry but pushed back her tears. "My baby can't breathe. She don't eat. She got a whistle inside her chest like a kettle on a stove." I pulled Frank aside and whispered to him desperately, "You should have told me. I can't do this. I ain't no doctor." "Yes, you can, son. Just like you helped that baby bird." "This ain't a bird." "Don't make no difference. A life is a life." "How am I supposed to do something I don't know how to do?" I said, terrified. "You just be still and let it come through you. You can't go chasing it down." "But what if, just imagine," said Frank in a hush, taking me by the shoulders, "just like you did that baby bird flying. You imagine this baby healthy. You imagine this baby breathing. You let all that imagination go through your hands. And then what?" "I don't know. You'll know better than me. Go on, boy. Be brave." I want to cut to the part where he's holding the baby and he's trying to imagine. Suddenly, I felt a twitch in the palm of my left hand. Just the slightest tingle, a prickling really, so that I couldn't quite discern if the feeling was painful or stimulating, like when water is so hot on the skin that it might be cold. The distinction cannot be made. Then my right hand twitched, sparkling to a tickle that felt like a fortune teller following the lines of my destiny with a fingernail. The current splayed to my fingers, tiny jolts of something charged, even voltaic. Then came a hotness. I felt my hands releasing, my fingers stretching and elongating, and I remembered when they had felt this way so long ago, before. But there was something more, a feeling inside of me that couldn't be located in my physical body, as if a door which had always existed but had always been locked suddenly opened slowly to a secret place and whatever was within engulfed me like a color I had never seen, a feeling almost too large for my body, and my knees buckled at its enormity, but I would not fall. I knew that something beyond myself was happening, like a dream, and I dared not peek for fear that it would end.
Wow. Wow. Makes me want to read the book again.
Thank you, Ken.
You have a great use of language. You love language. You love writing. You love grammar and so forth. One of the things I sensed in here, I mean, you is that you're an AP style kind of guy, and so my question is, so
What does that mean? I don't even know what that is.
I'm leading to it. Just hang on. Okay. Associated Press, AP style, Associated Press.
Oh,
So
okay. Yes.
Because you are apparently, at least, or maybe your editor is not a fan of the Oxford comma. And I got to tell you, it hurt. It hurt inside just a little bit. And I just want to know, why the hate, man? What have you got against the Oxford comma?
I'll tell you something, Ken. Punctuation is as dear to me as words. And they inform us of where to breathe and where to think. I wish I could put spaces, extra spaces between words sometimes. I know the rules and I happily break them. I start sentences with the wrong words and conjunctions, and I run on sentences. I do things that I try to create a rhythm of a story and of sentences. It's very musical to me. So I will take these things out and I will put these things back and kind of mess with it to create a sense of rhythm.
Yeah, I did sense that. I just, sometime we'll have a longer debate about the Oxford comma. That can be for our next conversation.
Well, you know, I think if you know the rules, you're allowed to break them.
Is that okay? Is that it? You need to work that in somewhere, dude. That's
Right.
really,
Okay. Thank you, Ken.
No, this really has been a lot of fun, and I just want to. You don't need to comment on this, but I just have to give a plug since my day job now, one of my day jobs, is Route 66, and I'm executive director of Route 66 Alliance. You have a nice reference to the end of the trail in Santa Monica and the pier. Again,
Right.
Not giving anything away, but it's really so important to this book. And but one of the things that I thought about, and I share this with the audience, is that as it is the end of the trail, as you reach on Route 66, you reach the pier in Santa Monica, for Theo, it's also a new beginning. It's also a new beginning, and I think that's what Route 66 represents. And I was just pleased to see the mention in there because I thought it was really poignant, and I thought it really made a nice reference. So I just wanted to say, chops on that.
Thank
and
you.
props on that.
Thank you.
So any parting thoughts that you, besides buy the book, anything else that you want to share with our audience? We did hear from Linda Phillips, who sends you greetings from St. Louis, and the book is amazing, she says.
Thank you. You know, I guess the only thing I want to say is, more than any other medium, and we talked about this a little bit beforehand, Ken, a book is so personal. And when you finally, it took me 4 years to write this, and when you finally push send, and you know, you're talking about punctuation, oh my God, there will never be a time that I look at this that I think, oh, I should have put a comma here, or I should have changed this word to this. So to let it go and let my baby out, much more so than a record, much more so than a TV show, much more than any of those things. This is the most personal work I've ever done. And I think it's my best work. I'm very proud of it. And because it's so emotional and the stories are, I'm just at this place. That's why this is so important to me and so thrilling for me to be able to be with you guys and celebrate the release of this book in Oklahoma, where I'm from, where the book is set. And it's just a nice, good feeling to me.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a thrill for me to get to be a part of this with you.
Thank you.
You've done an amazing job. Everyone go out, buy the book, tell your friends. Here's a couple more comments just real quick from Kathy Pearsall says, can't wait until you come back to New York City. Saw you at Feinstein's 54 Below last year. So good.
I think when I was at 54 Below last year, I had like scratched my cornea and I almost had to wear an eye patch. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay. Well, obviously, you faked your way through it, and you presented a show. The show must go on.
Always.
And yes, and she said, and you told that story
I did.
while you were there. So there you go. And then from Kathy Avital, thank you, Ken and Sam, for doing this. I've just started the book, and I see that I'll be up very late tonight reading.
That's the best thing I could ever hear. Thank you, Kathy.
So we will end on that note and say, Sam, it's been an absolute delight and pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to do this with us. Thank you, Magic City Books, for hosting us. I would say, Pat, would you like to wrap us up? I just want to make sure I do this right.
You were doing a great job. I was going to let it go right from there.
Well, we do appreciate you so much for hosting us. And
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you to Jeff Martin at Booksmart.
Absolutely.
Right. Sam, Ken, thank you very much. We will be back again Thursday night with author Neil Shubin for a book, a completely different kind of book, a nonfiction book about science, and then back again, like we said, next Monday with Sam Joyner and Fran Ringgold. So thank you all very much for joining us. Sam, have a great evening. And Ken, I hope to see you real soon.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Pat.
We'll do it again sometime.
Thanks for watching.
That's right.
All right.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye.